Hey, welcome to the Cayman Islands. We're on Grand Cayman to be specific. I relocated here from Ontario in April, and since then I've been exploring the terrestrial and marine life on the island, as well as some landscapes. This being my first YouTube video, I thought we'd jump into the ocean and see what we can find in the way of marine life today. I'm going to use my Olympus OM1 with the 8mm Mzoico fisheye lens in my AOI housing. I purchased all the AOI equipment shortly before moving down to the Cayman Islands. Right before the move, AOI, full disclaimer, was graciously enough to supply me with the 4-inch glass dome for the 8mm fisheye lens. And it's quickly become my favorite combination for larger marine life, such as the green sea turtles, stingrays, that type of thing, and some reefscapes as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to jump into the ocean. I've got my strobe arm outfitted with a GoPro attachment so I can do some live footage while we're in the water, approaching the subjects as well. And yeah, it's a beautiful day here. We're at my favorite location. We usually find lots of green sea turtles here early in the morning, and a couple of stingrays are usually hanging around. So let's jump in the ocean and see what we can find.
Okay, we're all set to go. I've got the GoPro onto the strobe arms of the underwater housing so I can record some video footage of the subjects we do find. As soon as I enter the water here, there's a large expanse of seagrass on the ocean floor that I need to swim out across to get to the locations where the subjects are typically found. While swimming out across the seagrass, I'll take this as an opportunity to adjust the ISO, f-stop, and shutter speed on the OM1, so I have my base exposure all set up ready to go when I do encounter subjects. Unfortunately, there were no green sea turtles today. And typically where the seagrass starts to give way to more of a sandy bottom, we will encounter those subjects. As you can see at the top of the frame, we have a large southern stingray coming into view. So I'm going to swim over, get above it, and sort of position myself for the dive down to capture some frames. It looks like she's going to settle on a spot here and start looking for some food, possibly start feeding on some hidden crustaceans in the sand. So I'm diving down and I'll fire off at 20 frames a second. And here's our first frame of that initial burst of images. I always set the OM1 to the high frame rate so that when I do capture the images, I have multiple frames to select from later on at the computer. And this can be the position of the stingray, the position of the barjacks that tend to follow the stingrays around, and just how they line up in the frame. So here we can see that this image was photographed with the Olympus OM1, the Mzoico 8mm fisheye lens using an ISO of 500, aperture of f8, and a shutter speed of 1/640th of a second. I like to select an aperture of about f5.6 to f8. In this case, I went with f8 to try to maximize the depth of field from the stingray to the barjack that's behind the stingray. The faster shutter speed is in case that stingray decides to turn and bolt away from me. That way my shutter speed is fast enough to record some of the action. And the AOI housing allows full control of the OM1, and the glass dome is specifically designed for the fisheye lens. Okay, so now we're going to try and line ourselves up for another shot of this lovely stingray. We have a little bit of a cloud blocking the sun right now, so we have a little bit of overcast type light, which I do quite like for photographing the stingrays and other subjects on the ocean floor. I think it just makes the even lighting a little nicer. So the stingray did start feeding. We can tell by the arched up back, the substrate is being disturbed from the ocean floor as the stingray digs for crustaceans. You can see here in the image specifications, due to the overcast light, I did have to increase the ISO to 1000 while maintaining the aperture of f8 to get a shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, again to keep that shutter speed up in case of some fast action. When using my OM1 for the last little while, I've been setting my white balance to the OM1's underwater white balance setting, which I think does a really nice job of keeping more accurate colors under the water. When I edit my photos, I do use Adobe Photoshop for all my post-production work, and I use Adobe Camera Raw for my pre-production edits on the raw files. And I also use camera-specific linear profiles provided by Tony Kuiper, which I think give you a little more flexibility with sliders in camera raw. Okay, the sun's back out again. Our stingray is still swimming around looking for food. We'll get ourselves into position, and then I will do another swim down. And when I do this, I like to make sure I get the camera right down at the stingray's level so you're really getting a nice perspective. And you can see that that low perspective gives us a real nice view. And just as I was snapping my series of frames, the stingray did decide to bolt away from me, and I captured this nice little pose of it just getting ready to go. One of the things I like about using the Zoico 8mm fisheye lens in the 4-inch glass dome is the close focusing distance. I can get in really close with that fisheye lens, and because the dome is a small dome, I can maximize that close focusing distance. I have used my Zoico 7 to 14mm lens inside the 8-inch acrylic dome made by AOI, and I do love it. The image quality is just as superb, but with that fisheye lens in the small glass dome, I am able to focus a little bit closer, and I think that little bit closer I can get does make enough of an impact to really justify using that more for the larger marine life that I do encounter. And the small 4-inch dome is a little easier to maneuver underwater. I've located one more stingray for the day. This particular one is in about 20 feet of water, but it's over a lovely white sandy section of the ocean floor. So I'll take a big deep breath and head on down to the stingray. While I'm diving down, I'll pay particular attention to how my shadow is being cast on the ocean floor. Even though it's 20 feet down, on a bright sunny day, you really do need to pay attention to where your shadow is falling when photographing with ambient light. Now we're down with the stingray getting into position to get that camera ready for that low perspective that I like to capture. And this image turned out to be my favorite of the day. I really like the position of the barjack. I love the white sand and the blue tones of the ocean in the background. I did have to push myself a little to get this picture because the stingray was in about 20 feet of water, and holding your breath to go down, frame up some images can be a bit tricky. A lot of times when I go down for deep shots like this, I'm shooting blind. I get down as deep as I can get and just reach my arm down with the camera to the ocean floor and fire off a burst of frames at the 20 frames a second. As you can see in the image specs, I did use an ISO of 1000 here. We were down a bit deeper. I wanted a little higher ISO just to make sure I was keeping that shutter speed fast at the 1/500th of a second to freeze the action. Well, thanks so much for watching episode 1 of CaymanWild. This is Andrew McLaughlin. Please remember to hit that like button and the subscribe button, and we'll see you all next time. Cheers.